Let's talk a little bit about Twisted Metal, the video game adaptation that is currently streaming its second season on Peacock. And it's good. It's really good. There's a lot of reasons to be skeptical of Twisted Metal. While the past couple of years have seen a number of surprisingly high-quality translations of video games into film and television, quality is by no means a given in video game adaptations. In particular, it's difficult to translate a story-light experiential video game into another medium without it feeling like watching a somewhat uninspired playthrough. The Twisted Metal games certainly have lore. Lots of lore. Lore that you would not believe. But really, the joy of playing Twisted Metal wasn't the mythology or the story, but the sheer visceral delight in vehicular carnage. The beauty of the recent Peacock adaptation is that it understands this. Twisted Metal is not War and Peace. This is not an adaptation that will live or die based on its fidelity to the source material. Instead, the production team understand that the key to a successful adaptation of Twisted Metal is trying to capture that feeling of wonder and delight playing the video game as a teenager after school, eating reheated pizza, drinking gallons of soft drinks with the sort of color additives that are now illegal because they give you cancer. The show knows what it is. It's silly, it's goofy, it's unashamedly so. It's shot largely in airfields or gigantic empty hangars. It's budgeted responsibly for a streaming show, which means it looks like it costs something comparable to Xena Warrior Princess, but it puts that money where it counts, making real cars go boom on screen. The cast is broadly likable, and yes, Casey, that includes Anthony Mackie.
I sort of kind of don't like Anthony Mackie, and that's a whole different thing, but...
Is it because of Mom Spaghetti? Is that why? Because he got dissed on so hard?
He used to be called Clarence.
Shut up! No, you shut up, Mackie.
And the series is willing to lean into the more absurd aspects of its premise. It's also funny, charming, and has relatively big thematic ideas for a show featuring a murderous clown who rides around in an ice cream van.
Some of my best friends are black.
It's one of the most charming surprises of the year, and well worth your time. So this week, we're going to talk about Twisted Metal. In particular, the way that the show uses nostalgia, which is perhaps the dominant cultural currency of the moment, and how the series understands that nostalgia in a surprisingly thoughtful and nuanced way that distinguishes it from so many of the bigger brands and more expensive franchises. So with that in mind, strap in and start your engines.
L1, R1, up, down, left, right, down, up!
Okay, you probably don't need me to tell you that pop culture is saturated with nostalgia. This July saw the release of the 7th movie in the Jurassic Park series, the 3rd cinematic reboot of the Superman franchise in the past 20 years, this time just straight up using the John Williams score, and the 3rd attempt to launch a Fantastic Four franchise, this time set in a nostalgic retrofuturist invocation of the 1960s. The highest-grossing American film of the year to date is a remake of Lilo and Stitch, and last weekend saw the release of a Lego sequel to Freaky Friday. To paraphrase one of our great thinkers, it seems like the future will be better yesterday. We are, as a culture, living in the past. Our cinema's flooded with Lego sequels to movies like Ghostbusters and The Goonies. And sure, franchises and sequels were always around and a part of life, but to put this in perspective, it's as if Hollywood had spent the 1980s producing a 5th Casablanca sequel, or a 3rd attempted reboot of the Treasure of the Sierra Madre franchise. In 1990, the worldwide top 10 included a single sequel, Die Hard 2, Die Harder, which I can only assume is a follow-up to an independent German film.
That's German for the Bart, the.
Last year, the entire top 10 was comprised of sequels and prequels. And yes, I'm counting Wicked as a prequel to The Wizard of Oz, given how hard the trailer for Part 2 leans into the restaging of the classic MGM film. And look, personally, I think this trend is worrying and frustrating. I would like to see more space, budget, and attention given to projects that are relatively original and interesting. But you've probably heard that argument a dozen times before, and that's not what this video is about. So, let's set aside the question of whether this is good or bad, and accept that if pop culture is going to be dominated by nostalgia, it's worth asking why and how pop culture should engage with that nostalgia, and what audiences actually want from that. And exploring how Twisted Metal fundamentally gets this. When you cover pop culture long enough, you start to see trends. In particular, there's the inevitable backlash against nostalgic revivals of beloved resurrected properties. Think of new takes on franchises like Star Trek or Star Wars, which often lean heavily and explicitly into nostalgia. Beloved characters return.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Iconic lines are repeated.
Do it! Do it!
Classic set pieces are painstakingly recreated. However, you inevitably see a very vocal rejection of these adaptations from the audience they're designed to appeal to. Viewers who don't want new things or new ideas intruding into their properties. And there are inevitably all manner of justifications and rationalizations for why these fans, the ostensible target market for these extremely nostalgic recreations of their beloved properties, are so angry about it. Suddenly, Star Wars, a franchise that George Lucas explicitly created as a commentary on the Vietnam War, and Star Trek, a show that famously featured an episode about interspecies racism between an alien species that was half black and half white, are, quote, too political. Shows and films using modern craft and technology don't look exactly like shows and films using the materials and techniques of that moment in time. Ultimately, though, a lot of these complaints boil down to something ineffable. These nostalgic revivals of childhood favorites don't feel right. The audience member watching a new Willow show as an adult on Disney Plus doesn't feel the same way that they did watching the original film in the cinema or on VHS as a child in the 1980s or 1990s. It's off. It's wrong. It's uncanny. And as a cultural commentator who engages a great deal with fans, this is what so many complaints about these properties boil down to, and why they can't be resolved. This is the paradox of nostalgia. A lot of audiences don't want to return as adults to the things that they loved as children. They want to recapture the feeling of watching that media as children. The golden age of science fiction is 12, quipped Peter Graham in 1957. Film critic Alonso Duralde is fond of asking, is it great, or were you 8? The modern world is chaotic and turbulent. Adult life is difficult, particularly in this moment of time. Who can blame audiences for seeking refuge in a time of relative simplicity and security? It isn't just that fans want a new Ghostbusters movie, it's that they want to recreate the feeling of watching Ghostbusters in the relative comfort and innocence of their own childhood.
And that's where the cars and the guns come in.
This is the magic of Twisted Metal as a video game adaptation. The show understands that the audience isn't necessarily nostalgic for the lore and continuity of the source material, although there is plenty of that. Instead, Twisted Metal understands that the viewer wanting to bask in the show's nostalgic glow really wants to be transported back in time. So the series as a whole is saturated in 1990s nostalgia. The second season opens with an extended homage to The Craft, which feels more faithful to that 90s teen horror than the actual Lego sequel that was released a few years back. This reference is itself an allusion to the fact that the character of Raven was, at least in the first season, played by 90s icon Neve Campbell. In the season premiere, John Doe falls in love with the Babysitter Club books while under house arrest, to the point that he is driven nearly to the brink of insanity by the missing 89th book in the series, Christie and the Dirty Diapers, published in September 1995. The episode's big, climactic action beat is set to DMX's Rough Riders anthem, which was released in May 1998. The show's soundtrack, production design, and cultural references are all designed to take the audience back in time to the 1990s.
Let me see that thong.
Twisted Metal understands that the audience isn't nostalgic for the intellectual property of Twisted Metal itself, its iconography, its continuity, its lore, so much as they are nostalgic for the experience of being kids playing Twisted Metal. The show leans into this larger meta-text. At the end of the first season, John Doe literally moves back into his childhood home.
This is yours. This is where you grew up.
Early in the second season, John Doe plans to escape to the cabin where his family would holiday when he was a child.
My family, we have a cabin. Beautiful cabin in the middle of nowhere.
As part of the eponymous Twisted Metal tournament, the contenders all move into an abandoned high school together. There's a strong sense in the show of trying to recapture a lot of adolescence, a holistic recreation of the experience of engaging with Twisted Metal as part of one's teenage years, played after school while jamming to What Is Love by Haddaway or Dragula by Rob Zombie. It's a novel approach to a property like this, but one that feels like it truly understands what's at the root of this modern culture of nostalgia.
This isn't my home. It's his. Whatever his name is. This isn't me anymore.
Look, it's safe to say that this culture of nostalgia is not going away anytime soon. Studies suggest that Americans are increasingly cynical about the future and romantic about the past. And this goes some way towards explaining why even HBO is churning out Perry Mason reboots. However, it's easy for studios making these films and shows to get lost in the trappings of that impulse, to assume that this appetite can be fed by reviving old properties or bringing back established actors. However, in many cases, the acknowledgement that time has passed seems to upset those fans most hungry to recapture their lost youth. For a silly little sitcom about vehicular combat, Twisted Metal has a sharp take on this trend. It understands that many of these viewers don't want their beloved properties to catch up to them, but that they want to be taken back in time themselves. Twisted Metal understands that sometimes, to get where the audience wants to go, you gotta hit reverse. I've been Darren Mooney, and this was The Backdrop.